The fluorescent lights in Block D hummed their eternal song, a flat, lifeless drone that Marcus Holloway had memorized down to its every fluctuation over 12 years. 12 years of concrete walls, 12 years of stale air that tasted like disinfectant and despair, 12 years waiting for a date with a needle that would stop his heart. He sat on the edge of his narrow cot, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the calendar scratched into the wall beside his steel toilet. 4,380 days, each one marked with a thin line carved by a plastic spoon handle he'd sharpened against the floor. The guards never noticed. They stopped really seeing death row inmates after the first year. Holloway, the voice of Officer Briggs crackled through the intercom. Inspection in 10. Look alive. Marcus almost laughed at the irony. Look alive. In a place designed for the opposite. He stood slowly, his 6'2" frame unfolding with the careful movements of a man who'd learned to conserve energy. At 41, he was neither young nor old, suspended in that strange limbo where death row inmates existed, aging without living, breathing without really being alive. His face, once handsome according to the old photos his sister used to send, had hardened into sharp angles and hollow shadows. His eyes, though, those deep brown eyes, still held something the prison couldn't kill. Not yet. The new warden had implemented monthly inspections, some bureaucratic initiative to ensure humane conditions for inmates awaiting execution, as if anything about this place was humane, as if inspecting the cages made the waiting any less cruel. Marcus heard the heavy boots before he saw them. The inspection team always moved like a small army through Block D. 4 guards, 1 administrator, and today someone new. He could tell by the rhythm of the footsteps. Confident, purposeful, different. Through the small, reinforced window in his cell door, he watched them approach. Officer Briggs led the pack, his considerable belly straining against his uniform shirt. Behind him, Officer Chen, young and nervous, always sweating despite the prison's perpetual chill. Then Administrative Supervisor Morris, clipboard clutched like a shield, his wire-rimmed glasses perpetually sliding down his nose. But it was the woman at the back who caught Marcus's attention. She was tall, maybe 5'10", with dark hair pulled into a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. Her uniform was crisp, pressed with military precision, the captain's bars on her shoulders gleaming under the harsh lights. She walked with the posture of someone who'd earned those bars through fire, not favors. Her eyes, pale gray, almost silver, swept the corridor with the methodical assessment of a predator evaluating territory. Captain Rebecca Hartfield. Marcus had heard the whispers from the guards. The new chief of operations transferred from a facility in Virginia, former Army MP, Bronze Star recipient, zero-tolerance policy, by the book, hard as coffin nails. Cell 7, Morris announced, consulting his clipboard. Marcus Holloway, 12 years, scheduled for execution. He paused, flipping pages. No current date set. Appeals pending. Pending. That word had defined Marcus's existence for over a decade. Pending review, pending decision, pending, pending, pending. A life suspended in judicial amber. Captain Hartfield stopped in front of his cell. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, those gray eyes reading him like a book written in a language only she understood. Marcus held her gaze. He'd learned early that looking away was seen as weakness, and weakness in prison, even maximum security death row, could be fatal in subtle ways. "Mr. Holloway," she said. Her voice was surprisingly soft, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "How are conditions in your cell?" The question caught him off guard. In 12 years, no one had asked him that. Not really asked, like his answer might actually matter. "Adequate, Captain," he replied carefully. "No complaints." A lie. He had 1,000 complaints. The constant cold that seeped into his bones. The food that barely qualified as nutrition. The isolation that made days blend into an endless gray smear. The knowledge that his sister stopped writing 3 years ago because watching him die slowly was killing her too. But what good were complaints from a dead man walking? Hartfield's eyes narrowed slightly as if she'd caught the lie but chose not to pursue it. Medical care? Access to reading materials? Exercise time? All within regulations, ma'am. She made a note on a small pad she'd pulled from her pocket. "I'm reviewing all long-term cases in this facility, ensuring protocol compliance, proper documentation, humane treatment." She paused, those gray eyes finding his again. "I read your file last night." Marcus's heart kicked up its rhythm, a dangerous thing when you'd trained it to stay steady for 12 years. No one read the files. The files gathered dust in cabinets while men like him gathered dust in cells. All night, she continued, her voice dropping lower, intimate despite the audience of guards. 247 pages. Police reports, trial transcripts, witness statements, appeals. Another pause, heavy as a judge's gavel. Inconsistencies. Officer Briggs shifted uncomfortably. Captain, we have 8 more cells to... I'm aware of the schedule, officer. She didn't look away from Marcus. Mr. Holloway was convicted of first-degree murder. Shot a convenience store clerk during a robbery in Milwaukee. The clerk, Gerald Chen, was 23 years old, left behind a wife and infant daughter. She recited the facts like reading from a script she'd memorized. You maintained your innocence throughout the trial. Still do. Yes, ma'am. Marcus's throat had gone dry. Where was this going? The gun was never found. Fingerprint evidence was inconclusive. The sole eyewitness, a customer named Raymond Vickers, positively identified you. She tilted her head slightly. But Vickers had prior arrests for false reporting, and he received a reward of $5,000 for his testimony. Marcus's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He'd screamed these same facts at lawyers, judges, his own inadequate public defender. The system didn't care. The system needed someone to blame, and he'd been convenient. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong color skin in a neighborhood that wanted justice fast and didn't care if it was right. I didn't kill Gerald Chen, Marcus said quietly, but I'm not naive enough to think that matters anymore. Something flickered in Hartfield's eyes. Respect? Sympathy? He couldn't tell. Justice isn't about convenience, Mr. Holloway. It's about truth. With respect, Captain, Marcus said, the words tasting bitter. Justice is about what 12 people believe when a prosecutor tells a good story. Before she could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice. The normal buzz of the fluorescent tubes hitched, creating a momentary dissonance in the prison's rhythm. Morris frowned at his clipboard as if it might explain the power fluctuation. Electrical issues again, Briggs muttered. 3rd time this month. Maintenance keeps saying. Captain Hartfield swayed. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift in her weight, a hand reaching out to steady herself against the cell door. But Marcus, with 12 years of observing every tiny detail of his environment, saw it. Saw how her face paled from healthy olive to sickly gray in the span of a heartbeat. Saw how her left hand pressed against her chest, fingers splaying wide as if trying to hold something inside. Captain? Morris stepped forward, concerned but uncertain. She tried to wave him off, but the gesture turned into something desperate, clawing at air. Her breathing had changed. Short, shallow gasps that whistled through clenched teeth. Then her knees buckled. She went down hard, her body hitting the concrete floor with a sound that made Marcus wince. Her head cracked against the ground and she lay still, eyes rolling back, showing only whites. Jesus! Chen dropped to his knees beside her. Captain Hartfield. Briggs fumbled for his radio. Medical emergency in Block D. Officer down. We need... She's not breathing. Morris's voice climbed into panic territory. She's not... Oh God, she's not breathing. Marcus pressed his face against the small window. His view limited but enough to see the chaos unfolding 6 feet from his cell. 3 grown men, 2 of them supposedly trained in emergency response, standing around a dying woman with the helpless confusion of children who'd never seen real crisis. Chen had his hands on her chest but wasn't applying compressions. Briggs was still yelling into his radio, accomplishing nothing. Morris just stood there, clipboard forgotten, useless. Start compressions, Marcus shouted through the door. Chen, put your hands on her sternum and push. 3 faces turned to him, shocked that the furniture had spoken. Do it now, Marcus roared with a command voice he didn't know he still possessed. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, fast and hard. She's got maybe 2 minutes before brain damage. Chen looked at Briggs. Briggs looked at Morris. Hartfield's lips were turning blue. Move! Marcus slammed his palm against the door. Stack your hands, lock your elbows, push straight down 2 inches, count out loud. Do it or she dies. Something in his voice, maybe the absolute certainty, maybe the desperate authority of a man with nothing left to lose, broke through their paralysis. Chen positioned his hands, started pushing. Too shallow, too slow. Harder. You're not going to hurt her. 100 beats per minute. Sing Staying Alive in your head if you have to. Faster. The compressions improved. Chen counted through gritted teeth, sweat already pouring down his face. Briggs, Marcus snapped. Tilt her head back, lift her chin. Clear her airway. Morris, time the compressions, call them out. 30. Then Briggs gives 2 breaths. They moved like puppets with Marcus pulling strings from inside a locked cage. 30 compressions. 2 rescue breaths. Repeat. The medical team would take at least 5 minutes to reach Block D. It was protocol. Security checks at every gate when entering death row. 5 minutes might as well be 5 hours. Marcus watched Hartfield's face, looking for signs. Her color wasn't improving. Check for a pulse, he ordered. Chen, 2 fingers on her carotid, left side of her neck. Chen's hands shook as he pressed his fingers to her throat. I don't feel anything. Keep going. Don't stop compressions for more than 10 seconds. Your arms are going to burn. Push through it. She needs you. Minutes crawled by like hours. Chen's compressions began to flag, his arms trembling with exhaustion. I can't. Yes, you can, Marcus said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. You're doing great. Just 20 more. She's fighting because of you. Keep going. Finally, blessedly, the distant wail of the medical team's approach echoed through the corridor. 4 paramedics burst through the security door, equipment rattling. They took over with professional efficiency. Portable defibrillator, oxygen, IV line. Clear. The lead paramedic pressed the defibrillator paddles to Hartfield's chest. Her body convulsed. The machine beeped. We've got a rhythm. Weak but present. Let's move her, now. They loaded her onto a gurney with practiced speed, securing straps, attaching monitoring equipment. Within 90 seconds of their arrival, they were gone, racing her toward the prison's medical wing, where an ambulance would be waiting to transport her to Milwaukee General. The corridor fell silent except for Chen's ragged breathing and the eternal hum of fluorescent lights. Briggs finally lowered his radio, his face ashen. He looked at Marcus through the window, an expression of such confusion and grudging respect that it almost broke through the emotional armor Marcus had built over 12 years. You, Briggs started, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. How did you know what to do? Marcus stepped back from the door, returning to his cot. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline bleeding off into exhaustion. My mother had a heart condition. I learned CPR when I was 16, thought it would help. A bitter smile touched his lips. Guess it finally did. Morris had retrieved his fallen clipboard, holding it like a lifeline. You saved her life, he said quietly. You understand that, don't you? If you hadn't told us what to do, she would have died. Marcus finished. Right here in front of my cell. Another person dying while I watched. Yeah, I understand. The 3 men exchanged looks, some silent communication that excluded him as it always had, as it always would. Then Briggs nodded slowly, made a note on his own pad. I'm putting this in my report. All of it. Do what you need to do, officer. They left him alone then, moving on to complete their interrupted inspection. Marcus lay back on his cot, staring at the ceiling tiles he'd memorized every stain and crack of. His heart was still racing, his mind replaying those terrible minutes when a woman's life had balanced on the edge of a knife. Captain Rebecca Hartfield, who'd read his file all night, who'd seen inconsistencies, who'd looked at him like he might be something more than a number and a date, who might have died 6 feet from his cell if he'd stayed silent. Marcus didn't believe in fate. 12 years in a cage had beaten that superstition out of him. But as he traced the scratch marks on his wall, 4,380 days and now one more moment that might change everything, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the universe had one last card to play. Outside his cell, the lights hummed, the prison breathed, and somewhere in Milwaukee General Hospital, Captain Rebecca Hartfield's heart, restarted by instructions shouted through a locked door by a man condemned to die, kept beating. One more day, one more breath, pending. Rebecca Hartfield opened her eyes to the sterile white ceiling of Milwaukee General Hospital's cardiac intensive care unit. The first thing she registered was pain, a deep bruising ache in her chest that radiated outward with each breath. The second thing was the steady beep of the heart monitor beside her bed, a sound that should have been reassuring but instead felt like an accusation. Her heart had betrayed her. Welcome back, Captain. She turned her head slowly, fighting against the fog of medication. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the young officer she'd learned later, stood beside the bed, tablet in hand, her expression professionally neutral, but eyes betraying concern. How long? Rebecca's voice came out as a rasp, her throat raw. From the breathing tube, she realized. They'd intubated her. 18 hours. You arrested at 1447 yesterday in Redwood Maximum Security Facility. Block D ventricular fibrillation. Your heart stopped for approximately 4 minutes before the medical team reached you. Dr. Chen swiped through screens on her tablet. You're extraordinarily lucky to be alive, Captain. and even more lucky to have no apparent neurological damage. 4 minutes. Rebecca's military training kicked in, calculating oxygen deprivation, brain cell death, permanent damage. 4 minutes was an eternity. The guards performed CPR. Yes, according to the incident report, Officer Chen and Officer Briggs maintained chest compressions and rescue breathing until the medical team arrived. Dr. Chen pulled up a chair, sitting down with the deliberate casualness of someone about to deliver difficult news. Captain, you had a widowmaker. You had a left anterior descending artery 95% blocked. We had to put in 2 stents. You're going to need significant lifestyle changes, medication, cardiac rehabilitation. Rebecca processed this information with the same methodical approach she'd applied to everything since her Army days. Assess the situation, identify the problem, develop a solution, execute. Prognosis? Good. If you follow protocol, you're 43, otherwise healthy, no diabetes, you don't smoke. But this was a warning shot, Captain. Your body is telling you something needs to change. Dr. Chen leaned forward. I reviewed your work history. 80-hour weeks. High-stress environment. You've been running on fumes for how long? Since Afghanistan. Since the IED that killed 3 of her soldiers while she walked away without a scratch. Since she'd thrown herself into work to avoid thinking about the randomness of death, the cosmic joke of survival. But she didn't say that out loud. I'll make adjustments, Rebecca said instead. You'll make radical changes or you'll be back here. Next time you might not be so lucky. Dr. Chen stood making final notes. You've got visitors waiting. Your deputy warden, some officers from the facility. I'm limiting visits to 10 minutes each. You need rest. After Dr. Chen left, Rebecca stared at the ceiling again, trying to remember. Block D, the inspection. She'd been talking to an inmate, Holloway. Marcus Holloway. She'd stayed up until 3 a.m. reading his case file. Something nagging at her. Inconsistencies piling up like evidence of a crime no one wanted to investigate. And then, nothing. A blank space where memory should be. One moment she'd been standing, the next she'd woken up here. The door opened and Deputy Warden Robert Torres entered, his weathered face creased with worry. Torres was old-school corrections, 30 years in the system, suspicious of change but fair. They developed a mutual respect in her 3 months at Redwood. Captain, he approached the bed carefully as if she might break. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck carrying other trucks. She managed a weak smile. I'm told I have you and your team to thank for still being here. Torres's expression shifted, becoming something complicated, pride mixed with discomfort. He pulled the chair closer, lowering his voice despite them being alone. Rebecca, there's something you need to know about what happened. Something that's complicated. She waited. Torres wasn't prone to drama. Your officers, Chen and Briggs, they didn't know what to do. They panicked. He rubbed his jaw. A tell she'd learned meant he was deeply uncomfortable. They were standing over you, frozen, while you died. It was the inmate who saved you. Rebecca's brain stuttered. What? Holloway. Marcus Holloway. He saw you go down through his cell window. Started shouting instructions. How to perform CPR, proper hand placement, compression depth, breathing intervals. He walked them through it step by step until the medical team arrived. Torres met her eyes. Chen's report is clear. Without Holloway's intervention, you'd be dead. No question. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Marcus Holloway, death row inmate, convicted murderer, had saved her life. She struggled for words. That's impossible. It's documented. Chen, Briggs, and Morris all gave identical statements. There's security footage. No audio in the corridor. But the visual confirms everything. They were just standing there until Holloway started directing them. Torres pulled out his phone, showed her a report. Holloway told Chen his mother had a heart condition. He learned CPR as a teenager. The technique he described was textbook perfect. Rebecca's mind raced, trying to reconcile this information with the file she'd read. Marcus Holloway, convicted of first-degree murder in the shooting death of Gerald Chen. No relation to Officer Chen. Another cosmic coincidence. Shot during a convenience store robbery. Death sentence. 12 years on death row. A killer who'd saved a life. I want to see the footage, she said. All of it. And I want to see Holloway. Torres's expression hardened. Rebecca, I understand gratitude, but this isn't about gratitude. She pushed herself up in the bed, ignoring the protest from her chest. I was reviewing his case before the arrest. There are problems with his conviction, Robert. Serious problems. Every inmate on death row claims innocence. Not like this. She'd read thousands of case files over her career, developed an instinct for genuine versus manufactured innocence. The eyewitness testimony doesn't hold up. The ballistics evidence was inconclusive. The timeline has holes you could drive a truck through. And now I find out this supposedly cold-blooded killer risks his own life to save mine? He didn't risk anything. He was locked in a cell. In a maximum security prison where any inmate action during an emergency can be interpreted as hostile, where guards are authorized to use lethal force if they perceive a threat. He knew that. Rebecca's voice grew stronger, her training reasserting itself despite her physical weakness. He knew that shouting, drawing attention to himself, giving orders to guards could get him shot. And he did it anyway. Torres was quiet for a long moment. "What are you saying, Rebecca?" "I'm saying I want a complete review of his case. Independent investigators. Fresh eyes on all the evidence. I'm saying that man saved my life, and if there's even a chance he's innocent, we owe him the truth. You're talking about reopening a 12-year-old case. The DA's office will fight you. The victim's family will fight you. This isn't just complicated. It's political dynamite. Then let it explode." Rebecca's gray eyes, still clouded with medication but burning with purpose, locked onto Torres. "I read about Gerald Chen, 23 years old. Left behind a wife and baby. That family deserves justice. Real justice. Not just someone paying for the crime. They deserve the person who actually killed him to be held accountable. And if that person is Holloway, then he dies and I sleep fine at night knowing we got it right." She leaned back against the pillows, exhausted but determined. "But if it's not him, Robert, if we executed an innocent man while the real killer walked free, could you sleep?" Torres stood slowly, pacing to the window. Milwaukee sprawled below them, afternoon sun glinting off glass and steel. "You know what you're opening up here? The scrutiny? The media circus? Your career could—" My heart stopped for 4 minutes yesterday. I got a very clear reminder that careers are temporary. Rebecca's voice softened. "I didn't take this job to maintain the status quo. I took it to fix a broken system. This might be broken too." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Chen poked her head in. "Captain, there's a detective here to see you. Says it's about the incident at the prison. Are you up for it?" Rebecca and Torres exchanged glances. "Send them in," she said. The detective who entered was a woman in her late 30s, sharp-featured with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her badge identified her as Detective Lisa Monroe, Milwaukee PD. She carried a leather folder and wore the expression of someone who'd seen enough darkness to dim any natural optimism. "Captain Hartfield, glad to see you're recovering." Monroe's tone was professional, clipped. "I'm following up on yesterday's incident. Standard protocol when there's a medical emergency at a correctional facility, especially one involving command staff." She opened her folder. "Consulting notes. I've interviewed your officers. Their statements are unusual." "I've been told," Rebecca said carefully. Monroe's eyes were shrewd. "Marcus Holloway instructed your officers in performing CPR, potentially saving your life. I've pulled his complete criminal history. Want to know what I found?" "Tell me." "Clean record before the convenience store shooting, not even a parking ticket. Worked as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex. Held the job for 6 years. Coached youth basketball at a community center. His employer described him as the most reliable person I ever hired. Neighbors called him helpful, quiet, kept to himself." Monroe flipped pages. "Then one night, according to the prosecution, he suddenly decides to rob a store he passes every day on his way to work, shoots the clerk for $93 in the register, and leaves behind zero physical evidence except being identified by a witness who happened to be the only person in the store." Rebecca's heart, her repaired, medication-regulated, still fragile heart, kicked up its pace. "You've looked into this. When someone on death row saves a cop's life, I look into it. That's my job." Monroe sat down, her expression grave. "Captain, I've read the trial transcripts. The witness, Raymond Vickers, had outstanding warrants in 2 states. 3 weeks after identifying Holloway, those warrants disappeared. He also received a $5,000 reward from the city's Crime Stoppers program." "Convenient," Torres muttered. "The detective who worked the case, Frank Russo, retired 2 years after Holloway's conviction. Moved to Florida, bought a boat, living comfortable. Maybe too comfortable on a detective's pension." Monroe's jaw tightened. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I've been a cop for 15 years and I know what a clean case looks like. This isn't one." Rebecca felt something shifting, pieces sliding into place. "What are you proposing, detective?" I'm proposing that if you're serious about reviewing this case, I'd like to be part of it. Officially, this is a closed case outside my jurisdiction. Unofficially, Monroe leaned forward. Gerald Chen's widow, Amy Chen, still lives in Milwaukee. Her daughter is 15 now. I've met them. They deserve to know the truth, whatever that truth is. Even if it means the wrong man has been on death row for 12 years, Rebecca asked quietly. Especially then, because that would mean the right person is still out there. Monroe closed her folder. Captain, I believe in justice, real justice, not the kind where we close a case and move on because it's convenient. If Holloway is guilty, then he earned his sentence, but if he's not, then we failed everyone, Rebecca finished. Gerald Chen, his family, Holloway, the entire system. The three of them sat in silence, the weight of what they were contemplating settling over the hospital room like snow. Outside, Milwaukee went about its business, unaware that in this small room, 3 people were preparing to tear open a wound 12 years old and see what had festered underneath. I'll need approval, Rebecca said finally. From the State Corrections Board, probably the governor's office. This is going to create waves. Let them wave, Torres said, surprising her. I've been in corrections 30 years. I've seen innocent men, I've seen guilty ones, and I've learned to tell the difference. He looked at Rebecca. You're right about this, I feel it in my gut. And if we're wrong, if Holloway is exactly what he was convicted of being, we'll know that too. But we have to look. Monroe nodded. I'll start pulling everything from the original investigation. Evidence logs, witness statements, crime scene photos, ballistics reports. If there's something there, I'll find it. I'll handle the political side, Rebecca said. Make the calls, file the paperwork, take the heat, but first. She paused, her chest aching with more than just physical pain. First, I need to talk to Marcus Holloway, face to face. I need to look him in the eye and ask him to tell me everything, from the beginning. When you're cleared for travel, Dr. Chen said from the doorway where she'd been quietly listening. Not before. Your heart needs time to heal, Captain. My heart is fine, Rebecca said, but even she could hear the lie. Her heart was broken, had been for years if she was honest. This was just a different kind of break, the kind that maybe, if she was very lucky and very careful, could heal into something stronger. 3 days later, Rebecca Hartfield signed herself out of Milwaukee General Hospital against medical advice. She had medication, instructions, warnings, and a follow-up appointment she had no intention of keeping on schedule. She also had a purpose that burned brighter than the pain in her chest. As Torres drove her back to Redwood Maximum Security Facility, she watched the city pass by the window. Somewhere out there, a killer walked free. Somewhere in a cell in Block D, a man who might be innocent waited to die. And somewhere in the tangled mess of evidence, testimony, and time, the truth waited to be found. Rebecca's phone buzzed. A text from Monroe. Found something in the evidence logs. You need to see this. Call me. She closed her eyes, feeling her heartbeat steady and strong beneath the bandage on her chest. Whatever came next, she was ready. Justice, she'd learned in Afghanistan, wasn't about being right. It was about being willing to face what you'd gotten wrong, and she was finally ready to face it. The drive to Redwood Maximum Security Facility took 45 minutes through Milwaukee's industrial corridor, a stretch of warehouses, freight yards, and forgotten neighborhoods where hope went to die. Rebecca watched it all through the passenger window, her hand unconsciously resting on her chest where the incision from her stent placement still ached with each heartbeat. You sure about this? Torres asked for the 3rd time, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. You were clinically dead 4 days ago. Maybe give yourself a week before diving into the deep end. The deep end is where the truth usually hides. Rebecca pulled out her phone, reviewing Monroe's text again. The detective had found something in the evidence logs, something significant enough to warrant 3 exclamation points and a request for an immediate call. But Rebecca wanted to see Holloway first before external evidence colored her perception. She needed to look into his eyes without preconceptions. Redwood loomed ahead, a brutal concrete monument to society's failures. 30-foot walls topped with razor wire, guard towers at each corner, the kind of place designed not for rehabilitation but for forgetting. Out of sight, out of mind, out of conscience. Rebecca had worked in 6 correctional facilities across 3 states, and they all had the same architecture of despair. The main gate rolled open with mechanical indifference. Torres flashed his credentials, and they drove through 3 more security checkpoints before reaching the administrative parking lot. Each gate closed behind them with a finality that always made Rebecca's skin crawl. This is what it felt like to be swallowed. Inside, the facility smelled like every prison Rebecca had ever known. Industrial cleaner fighting a losing battle against the funk of too many humans living in too little space. Officer Briggs met them at the entrance to the administrative wing, his usual swagger subdued. He'd lost weight in 4 days, Rebecca noticed. The kind of weight you lose when reality slaps you hard enough to reshape your understanding of the world. Captain. Briggs nodded, unable to meet her eyes. Good to see you up and around. Officer Briggs. Rebecca kept her tone neutral, professional. I understand I owe you my life. He flinched as if she'd struck him. No, ma'am. You don't owe me anything. He trailed off, his face reddening. We didn't know what to do. If it wasn't for Holloway, you'd have... He couldn't finish the sentence. You performed CPR under extreme stress in an emergency situation. That takes courage. Rebecca touched his arm briefly. I'm not here to judge anyone's panic response. I'm here because I need to speak with Marcus Holloway. Can you arrange that? Briggs looked at Torres, who nodded. Interview room 3, Torres said. It's the only one in Block D with full security protocols. Reinforced glass, panic buttons, armed guard outside. I don't want armed guards visible, Rebecca said. I want this to feel like a conversation, not an interrogation. Captain, he's a death row inmate who saved my life by talking through a locked door. I think I can manage a conversation through reinforced glass. She softened her tone. Robert, I need him to trust me. That doesn't happen with guns in the room. Torres sighed, but nodded. Guard will be outside, door unlocked, 3-second response time if you hit the panic button. That's as good as I can do. That's perfect. They walked through Block D, past cells where men existed in various states of resignation, rage, or madness. Death row held 43 inmates at Redwood. 43 men waiting for the state to kill them with clinical precision. 43 stories that might or might not include actual guilt. Rebecca had never questioned the death penalty before. It was policy, law, the system functioning as designed. But walking this corridor now, feeling the weight of all these suspended lives, something in her chest tightened that had nothing to do with cardiac damage. Interview room 3 was exactly as advertised. A gray box divided by reinforced plexiglass, with a phone system for communication, designed to make conversation possible while ensuring no physical contact. The guard chair on her side sat empty. On the other side, Marcus Holloway waited. He stood when she entered, a gesture of respect that surprised her. In 4 days, he'd become both more and less than the man she'd briefly met during the inspection. More real now that she knew what he'd done. Less monstrous now that she'd had time to read his file with fresh eyes and Monroe's observations echoing in her mind. Rebecca sat, picking up the phone. After a moment, Holloway did the same. His eyes, those deep brown eyes that had watched her nearly die, studied her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. Captain Hartfield. His voice through the phone was deeper than she remembered, textured with something that sounded like carefully controlled emotion. I'm glad you're alive. Direct. No preamble. Rebecca appreciated that. Thanks to you, Mr. Holloway. I'm told you walked my officers through CPR while I was coding. He shrugged. A minimal movement. I knew what to do. They didn't. Seemed like a waste to let you die when simple instructions could prevent it. Simple instructions that could have gotten you shot if a guard misinterpreted your shouting as aggressive behavior. Could have. Didn't. He leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. You didn't come here just to thank me, Captain. What do you want? Rebecca had interrogated hundreds of people in her career. As an MP, as corrections officer, as administrator, she'd developed a sense for deception, for the micro-expressions and verbal tells that separated truth from fiction. Holloway showed none of the classic signs. No unnecessary movement, no averted gaze, no verbal padding or deflection, just direct engagement. I want to hear your story, she said. From the beginning, the night Gerald Chen died. Something flickered in his expression, old pain, carefully controlled. I've told that story to lawyers, judges, parole boards. Nobody believed it then. Why would you believe it now? Because 4 days ago you saved my life without hesitation. Because I've read your file 7 times and the inconsistencies keep multiplying. Because Detective Lisa Monroe has been pulling the original investigation evidence and finding problems. Rebecca leaned forward. Because I think you might be innocent, and if you are, we've stolen 12 years of your life. I'd like to try to give you back whatever's left. Holloway was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he were physically chewing through layers of protective cynicism. Finally, he spoke. August 14th, 2013. I was driving home from work. I was a maintenance supervisor at Parkview Apartments. 52 units, constant problems. That night I'd stayed late fixing a water heater in Building C. Left around 10:30 p.m. His voice took on the quality of someone reciting memorized facts. Not because he was lying, Rebecca realized, but because he'd repeated this so many times it had become a script. Protection against the pain of constant disbelief. I stopped at Quick Mart on Henderson Avenue. Same store I stopped at 3 times a week for coffee and whatever Sandra had for dinner. Sandra was usually working the night shift. Older lady, always had a smile. But that night, it wasn't Sandra. It was a young guy, Gerald Chen. Holloway's expression darkened. I grabbed a coffee, some chips, stood in line behind another customer. White guy, maybe 40, 45, wearing a brewer's cap and a gray hoodie. I remember because he was sweating despite the air conditioning, kept his head down. That's not in any of the police reports, Rebecca said. I told them. Detective Russo said I was making it up, trying to create an alternative suspect, but I saw him. He paid cash for cigarettes and a scratch-off ticket, left before I got to the counter. Holloway's hands tightened on the phone. I paid for my stuff. Gerald seemed nervous, kept looking at the door. I asked if he was okay. He said yeah, just a long shift. I left, got in my car, drove away. The shooting happened at 10:47 p.m. according to the police report. Where were you? 3 blocks away, stopped at a red light. I heard the sirens, saw the police cars screaming past. Thought there'd been an accident. His voice dropped lower. I didn't know someone had been killed. Didn't know it was that store. Not until the police showed up at my apartment at 6 a.m. the next morning, guns drawn, telling me I was under arrest for murder. Rebecca made notes on a pad she'd brought. The witness, Raymond Vickers, positively identified you. Said you shot Gerald Chen during a robbery attempt. Raymond Vickers was the man in the brewer's cap. Holloway's voice hardened with certainty. I didn't recognize him at the trial. They cleaned him up, different clothes, no hat. But I'd bet my life it was him, which I guess I did, since they convicted me on his testimony. Why would he identify you if he was the shooter? Because he was standing there when I came in. He saw me, I saw him. Perfect Patsy. Similar height, similar build. And I'd been in that store 3 times a week for 2 years. Multiple people could place me there regularly. Easy to claim I was the one who came back and shot Gerald. Holloway's jaw clenched. The cops wanted a quick solve. Vickers gave them one, and I was convenient. Rebecca had read the trial transcripts twice. The prosecution's case had been entirely circumstantial. Witness identification, presence at the scene earlier that evening, and a motive constructed from whole cloth about financial desperation. No weapon, no gunshot residue, no physical evidence whatsoever linking Holloway to the crime. Your public defender didn't challenge the identification? My public defender was handling 60 cases and showed up to court looking like he'd slept in his car. He put me on the stand, asked me to tell my story, and the prosecution tore me apart, made me sound like a liar because I couldn't explain why Vickers would frame me. I didn't know about his warrants then, didn't know about the reward money. I just knew I didn't kill anyone and nobody believed me. Rebecca studied him carefully. Marcus. May I call you Marcus? It's my name. Marcus, I've interviewed thousands of inmates. The guilty ones always have elaborate explanations, detailed alibis, conspiracy theories. The innocent ones. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The innocent ones sound exactly like you. Frustrated, resigned, angry but without rage. You're not trying to convince me. You're just tired. I spent the first 5 years trying to convince everyone. Lawyers, judges, my sister, until she stopped visiting because it hurt too much to believe in something nobody else would. His eyes met hers, and she saw the depth of exhaustion there. Not physical, but spiritual. I'm not tired, Captain. I'm hollowed out. There's a difference. A knock on the glass interrupted them. Torres pointed at his watch. 30 minutes had passed. Rebecca nodded, held up 5 fingers. 5 more minutes. Detective Monroe found something in the evidence logs, Rebecca said. I don't know what yet, but I'm going to find out, and I'm going to keep digging until I know the truth. And if the truth is that I'm guilty? Marcus asked quietly. What then? Then you die, and I sleep fine knowing justice was served. Rebecca's voice was steel. But if you're innocent, if this system failed you, then I will burn down every obstacle between you and freedom. I will not let an innocent man die on my watch. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Hope, maybe, or the ghost of it. Why? Why do you care? Because you saved my life when you had every reason not to. Because justice isn't about closing cases. It's about getting them right. And because. She hesitated, then decided on honesty. Because I've spent 15 years enforcing a system I believed was fundamentally fair. If it isn't, if we're killing innocent people, then I've been complicit in something monstrous. I need to know which side of that line I'm on. Most people don't want to know, Marcus said softly. It's easier to believe the system works. I stopped taking the easy path when I enlisted at 18. Rebecca stood preparing to leave. I'll be back, Marcus, with answers, however long it takes. He stood too, mirroring her movement. Captain? Rebecca? He waited until she met his eyes. Thank you for listening. Even if nothing changes, thank you for believing it's worth looking. Rebecca left interview room 3 with her heart pounding, not from cardiac stress, but from the weight of what she'd just committed to. Torres waited in the corridor, his expression unreadable. You believe him, he said. Not a question. I believe he deserves a real investigation. There's a difference. Not much of one. Torres started walking back toward the administrative wing. Monroe called while you were in there. She wants you to meet her at the evidence warehouse. Says what she found changes everything. Rebecca's phone buzzed. Monroe again. This time the text was simple. Gun was never tested, chain of custody broken. Chain of... Someone didn't want this evidence examined. We need to talk. Now. The gun was never tested. The murder weapon, or what was claimed as the murder weapon, had never undergone proper ballistic analysis. That wasn't just an oversight. That was deliberate. Rebecca's cardiac rehabilitation plan called for reduced stress, moderate activity, and careful emotional regulation. But as she walked out of Redwood Maximum Security Facility into the bright afternoon sun, her pulse racing with something that felt like purpose for the first time in years, she knew that plan was about to get shattered. Somewhere in this city, buried in evidence boxes and witness statements and convenient official narratives, the truth waited, and she was going to excavate it, piece by piece, until Marcus Holloway either walked free or she understood exactly why he deserved to die. Justice, she'd learned, wasn't pretty, but it had to be true. And truth was always worth the fight. The Milwaukee Police Department's evidence warehouse sat in an industrial park near the airport, a nondescript concrete building that could have been storing auto parts or restaurant supplies. Nothing about its exterior suggested it held the physical remnants of thousands of crimes, the artifacts of tragedy, violence, and occasionally, injustice. Detective Lisa Monroe waited in the parking lot, leaning against her unmarked sedan with the impatience of someone who'd already been waiting too long. She straightened when Torres's vehicle pulled up, her expression tight with controlled urgency. Took you long enough, Monroe said as Rebecca climbed out. I've been sitting on this for 3 hours. Couldn't risk discussing it over the phone. That serious? Rebecca felt her rebuilt heart kick up its rhythm. Dr. Chen would not approve. That's serious. Monroe pulled out her badge, leading them toward the entrance. When you asked me to pull the original investigation files on the Chen murder, I started with the basics. Witness statements, crime scene photos, forensic reports. Standard procedure. But when I got to the evidence logs, things got weird fast. They signed in at the security desk, surrendering their phones and submitting to a metal detector. The evidence warehouse operated under strict chain of custody protocols. Every item logged, every access recorded, every movement documented. In theory, anyway. Monroe led them through rows of industrial shelving stacked with bankers' boxes, each labeled with case numbers and dates. The warehouse stretched back into dimness, a catacomb of sealed crimes. She stopped at a section marked 2013 Homicides and pulled down a box labeled 13 Hom 847, Chen Gerald. The murder weapon, Monroe said, setting the box on a nearby examination table, was allegedly found in a dumpster 3 blocks from the Quick Mart, a 9mm Ruger, serial number filed off, 1 spent casing. According to Detective Russo's report, ballistics confirmed it matched the bullet recovered from Gerald Chen's body. She opened the box, revealing plastic evidence bags containing various items, photographs, clothing, documentation. But what she pulled out made Rebecca's breath catch. A clear evidence bag containing a handgun, tagged and sealed with evidence tape. Except, Monroe continued, her voice dropping lower, when I pulled the actual ballistics report, not the summary in Russo's narrative, I found this. She withdrew a folder from her messenger bag, flipped it open to a specific page. The bullet was too damaged for definitive matching. The ballistics examiner wrote, and I quote, insufficient rifling marks for positive identification. Caliber consistent with weapon but cannot confirm this specific firearm as murder weapon. Torres leaned in, reading over Rebecca's shoulder. But Russo's report says confirmed match. Russo's report says a lot of things that don't match the underlying documentation. Monroe pulled out another sheet. Here's the evidence log. The gun was logged into evidence on August 15, 2013, the day after the murder. But look at this. She pointed to a notation. It was checked out on August 20th by Detective Frank Russo, signed back in August 21st. No explanation for why. No documentation of what was done with it during that time. Rebecca felt ice forming in her stomach. That's a chain of custody violation. It gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Monroe flipped through more documents. The gun was supposed to be sent to the FBI lab for more detailed analysis. The state crime lab couldn't get a definitive match, so protocol calls for escalation. There's a request form dated August 19th, but there's no record of it ever being sent. No follow-up, it just stopped. Russo buried it, Torres said flatly. He knew the gun couldn't be definitively linked to the murder, so he made sure no one looked closer. Can you prove that? Rebecca asked, her mind already racing through legal implications, appeals processes, evidentiary standards. Not directly, but I can prove he was sloppy enough to leave holes. Monroe pulled out her phone. They were in the examination area where phones were permitted, and opened her photos. I went back through Russo's case files from 2012 to 2014. He closed 18 murders in that period. Unusually high clearance rate. And guess what? Every single case had anomalies. She swiped through images, reports with missing pages, evidence logs with gaps, witness statements that didn't match initial interviews, a pattern of shortcuts, manipulations, and convenient oversights. Russo was dirty, Rebecca said, pieces clicking together. How dirty? I don't know yet, but I put in requests for his financial records from that period. Bank statements, property purchases, anything that might show unusual income. If he was taking payments to close cases fast and dirty, there might be a paper trail. Monroe's expression hardened. But here's what really bothers me. Raymond Vickers, the witness who identified Holloway. I tracked him down. He's living in Tampa now, working construction. I called him yesterday, said I was following up on an old case. And? Rebecca prompted when Monroe paused. He hung up, immediately. Then his lawyer called me back within an hour. A Tampa attorney who definitely doesn't come cheap for a construction worker. Told me his client had no comment and any further attempts to contact him would be considered harassment. Monroe crossed her arms. Why does a witness in a closed case need a lawyer? And how does he afford one? Torres pulled out his reading glasses, examining the ballistics report more carefully. This is enough for an appeal. Maybe not exoneration, but definitely grounds to reopen the case. It's a start, Rebecca agreed. But we need more. We need Vickers to talk. We need to prove Russo was corrupt. We need to connect the dots so clearly that no court can ignore it. She turned to Monroe. Can you get a warrant for Russo's financials? I can try, but he's in Florida, retired, and this is a 12-year-old closed case. I'd need probable cause of criminal wrongdoing, and right now I have suspicions, not proof. Monroe's frustration was evident. I'm working back channels, calling in favors, but it's going to take time. Time is something Marcus Holloway doesn't have much of. Rebecca pulled out the execution schedule Torres had printed for her that morning. The state attorney general is pushing for resolution on death row cases that have been pending over a decade. Holloway's case is on the priority list. If we don't move fast, he could get an execution date before we can prove anything. The three of them stood around the evidence table, staring at a gun that might have killed Gerald Chen, or might have been planted evidence in a corrupt detective's rush to close a case. 12 years had passed, memories had faded, witnesses had disappeared, evidence had deteriorated, and somewhere, maybe in Tampa, maybe still in Milwaukee, maybe already dead, the real killer walked free. What about the other man? Torres asked suddenly. Holloway said there was another customer in the store that night. White male, 40 to 45, brewer's cap, gray hoodie. That's not Vickers. He would have been 32 in 2013. Did Russo ever investigate that lead? Monroe flipped through her files, scanning interview notes. There's no mention of any other customer in any of the reports. Not in witness statements, not in scene documentation, nothing. Because Russo never looked, Rebecca said, anger building in her chest. He had his convenient suspect, his cooperative witness, and a gun that was close enough. Why complicate things? We need to find that man, Torres said. If he exists. If Holloway wasn't making him up. The store had security cameras, Monroe noted. checking her documentation. But the footage was supposedly corrupted. Only fragments recovered. None showing the interior at the time of the shooting. Convenient, Rebecca muttered. What are the chances of getting access to that footage now? 0. It was deleted according to standard protocol 2 years after the case closed. Monroe closed her files with a snap. Everything about this investigation was designed to point at Holloway and nowhere else. Russo built a tunnel, not a road. And once Holloway was convicted, nobody had any reason to question it. Rebecca's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She frowned, opening it. You're looking into the Chen murder. Stop. Some cases are better left closed. This is your only warning. She showed it to Monroe, who immediately took the phone, photographing the screen. Someone's paying attention to what we're doing. That's actually good news. How is a threat good news? Torres demanded. Because innocent people don't threaten investigators. Someone's worried about what we might find. Monroe pulled out an evidence bag, carefully placing Rebecca's phone inside. I'm logging this as evidence. Attempted intimidation of a law enforcement official. We'll trace the number, though. I'm guessing it's a burner. Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the warehouse's air conditioning. Someone was watching. Someone with enough investment in keeping the truth buried to risk threatening a corrections captain. We're close to something, she said quietly. Too close. Then we push harder, Monroe replied. I'll work the financial angle. Trace Vickers's lawyer. See if I can find any connection to Russo. Torres, can you pull internal prison records? Visitors, phone calls, mail? Anything that might show if Holloway had accomplices or connections that would support the robbery-murder theory? Torres nodded. I can have that by tomorrow morning. Though I'm guessing we'll find nothing. 12 years of records and Holloway's been a model inmate. No incidents, no violations, no suspicious contacts. Because he's not a criminal, Rebecca said with growing certainty. He's a man who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, seen by the wrong person, and railroaded by a corrupt system that needed someone to blame. Monroe began carefully repacking the evidence box. I need to be clear about something. This investigation is not official. I'm doing this on my own time, following up on what I'm calling concerns about case integrity. But if this goes where I think it's going, we're going to piss off a lot of powerful people. The DA's office that prosecuted Holloway, the police department that employed Russo, the appeals courts that upheld the conviction. They're all going to circle the wagons. Let them, Rebecca said. I didn't survive a heart attack to play it safe. If the system is broken, we fix it. If people get angry, they get angry. Justice isn't a popularity contest. Torres's expression was grim but determined. Rebecca, if you're really doing this, you need to understand the stakes. Your career, your reputation, maybe your safety, all of it goes on the line. And even if we prove Holloway is innocent, even if we identify the real killer, there's no guarantee we can undo 12 years of legal precedent. But we can try, Rebecca said firmly. We can stand up in court and say this was wrong and we're not going to let it stand. Maybe we lose. Maybe the system protects itself. But at least we'll know we tried. Monroe finished securing the evidence box, returning it to its shelf. I'll contact Gerald Chen's widow. Amy Chen, she deserves to know we're reopening this. If the wrong man is on death row, that means her husband's real killer was never caught. She might have information we don't. The thought of facing the victim's widow, of potentially telling her that the man she believed had murdered her husband might be innocent, made Rebecca's chest tighten. That's going to be a hard conversation. All the important ones are. Monroe headed toward the exit. I'll set up a meeting, feel her out before we drop the full story on her. If she's been living for 12 years thinking justice was served, learning it might not have been, that's going to reopen old wounds. They left the evidence warehouse together, emerging into late afternoon sunlight that felt too bright, too normal for the darkness they'd been excavating. In the parking lot, Monroe paused beside her car. One more thing, she said, her voice careful. I ran a basic background on you, Captain. Standard due diligence. You were Army MP, served in Afghanistan, decorated combat veteran, but you requested transfer out of the military justice system in 2016, reassigned to corrections. Why? Rebecca had known this question would come eventually. I prosecuted a soldier for assault. Open and shut case, multiple witnesses, physical evidence, confession. He was convicted, sentenced to 8 years at Leavenworth. 3 years into his sentence, new evidence surfaced. The confession was coerced. The witnesses had been pressured. The physical evidence was circumstantial at best. She met Monroe's eyes. He was innocent. And I'd helped put him in prison because I believed the system worked. I believed evidence didn't lie. I learned I was wrong. What happened to him? He was exonerated, released, given back pay and an apology. But 3 years of his life were gone. He struggled with PTSD, substance abuse, couldn't rebuild his life. Last I heard, he was homeless in Seattle. Rebecca's voice hardened. I transferred to corrections because I needed to understand how the system fails people. I thought if I worked inside prisons, I could make them better, fairer, more humane. Instead, I just found more failures. Monroe nodded slowly. So this isn't just about Holloway, this is personal. Everything is personal when you care about justice. Rebecca pulled out her car keys. I'll be in touch tomorrow. Whatever you find, whatever it costs, I want to know. Even if it destroys your career, I'd rather have destroyed career than a destroyed soul. Rebecca climbed into Torres's vehicle, exhaustion hitting her suddenly. The weight of the day, the strain on her healing heart, the magnitude of what they were attempting. As they drove back toward Redwood, Torres broke the long silence. You know this might not end well. Even if we prove everything, even if we expose Russo and find the real killer, the state might fight us every step. They don't like admitting mistakes, especially mistakes that cost someone 12 years of their life. Then we fight harder, Rebecca said, watching Milwaukee pass by the window. Because if we don't, if we just accept that the system gets it wrong sometimes and there's nothing we can do, then we're complicit. We're part of the machine that crushes innocent people. Her phone, now in an evidence bag in Monroe's possession, buzzed with another message she couldn't see. The threat had been clear. Stop investigating or face consequences. But Rebecca had faced IEDs in Afghanistan, had faced down her own failing heart, had faced the mirror every morning knowing she'd helped convict an innocent man once before. She wasn't stopping. Not now. Not ever. Somewhere in a cell in Block D, Marcus Holloway sat waiting, unaware that 3 people he barely knew were tearing apart a 12-year-old case on his behalf, unaware that evidence was crumbling, witnesses were hiding, and the truth was starting to emerge like bones from shallow graves. Justice was coming. Slow, messy, imperfect, but coming. And Rebecca Hartfield would make damn sure it arrived before the state could deliver its own twisted version, with a lethal injection. Amy Chen lived in a modest ranch house in Wauwatosa, a Milwaukee suburb where middle-class dreams were maintained through careful budgeting and quiet determination. The house was pale yellow with white trim, a small garden out front showing the first signs of spring growth. A basketball hoop stood in the driveway, its net weathered but intact. Normal. Painfully, deceptively normal. Detective Monroe had arranged the meeting for Thursday afternoon, explaining only that there were questions about the original investigation that required Mrs. Chen's input. Rebecca had insisted on coming along, despite Torres's objections about stress and recovery. Some conversations couldn't be delegated. They sat now in Amy Chen's living room, surrounded by photographs that documented a life interrupted. Wedding photos showing a young couple, Amy in white, Gerald in a rented tuxedo, both grinning with the invincibility of people who believed they had decades ahead. Baby pictures of a dark-haired infant, school photos tracking a girl's growth from gap-toothed kindergartner to sullen teenager. Life moving forward despite the massive hole blown through its center 12 years ago. Amy herself was 40 now, though she looked older, the kind of aging that comes from carrying grief like a second skeleton. Her dark hair streaked with premature gray was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore scrubs. She was a nurse at Children's Hospital, Monroe had mentioned, and her hands bore the chapped evidence of constant hand-washing. Her eyes, when they met Rebecca's, held a wariness born of experience with officials bearing uncomfortable news. Mrs. Chen, Monroe began gently, thank you for meeting with us. I know this is difficult. You said you had questions about Gerald's case. Amy's voice was steady but tight. That case was closed 12 years ago. Marcus Holloway was convicted. He's on death row. What questions could there possibly be? Rebecca leaned forward, choosing her words with surgical care. Mrs. Chen, I'm Captain Rebecca Hartfield, Chief of Operations at Redwood Maximum Security Facility where Mr. Holloway is incarcerated. Recently, some inconsistencies have come to light regarding the original investigation. We're reviewing the case to ensure that justice was properly served. Amy's expression hardened. Justice was served. That man murdered my husband for $93. He destroyed my family. My daughter grew up without a father because of him. Her voice cracked slightly. What inconsistencies? Monroe pulled out a folder, but kept it closed for now. The ballistics evidence was inconclusive. The murder weapon couldn't be definitively matched to the bullet that killed your husband. The witness identification has some problematic elements. And there are gaps in the chain of custody for key evidence. What are you saying? Amy's hands clenched in her lap. Are you saying they arrested the wrong person? We're saying the investigation may have been flawed, Rebecca said carefully. We're not making any conclusions yet, but we owe it to Gerald's memory to make sure the right person was held accountable. Amy stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, a teenage girl walked up the driveway. 15 years old, headphones in, backpack slung over one shoulder. Gerald's daughter, the infant who'd lost her father before she could form memories of him. That's Melissa, Amy said quietly. She's a sophomore now. Straight A student. Wants to study engineering at MIT. Gerald would have been so proud. She turned back to them, tears threatening but held in check through what looked like years of practice. Do you know what it's like to tell a 3-year-old that daddy isn't coming home? To watch her ask about him less and less as the years go by because the memory fades? To see her construct an idea of her father from photographs and stories instead of actual experiences? I can't imagine, Rebecca said honestly. But Mrs. Chen, if the wrong man is on death row, that means the person who actually killed Gerald is still out there. Don't you want to know the truth? I know the truth. Amy's composure cracked. I was there that night. I got the call at 11:15 p.m. from the police saying my husband had been shot. I went to the hospital and watched him die on an operating table. I identified his body. I sat through a trial and listened to Marcus Holloway's lies about being innocent. I've lived with this truth for 12 years. The front door opened. Melissa entered, pulling out her headphones. She was beautiful, her father's features softened by her mother's genetics, creating something striking and sad. She froze when she saw the visitors, her expression cycling through confusion to suspicion. Mom? What's going on? Amy wiped her eyes quickly. These people are from the police. They have questions about your father's case. Melissa's face went carefully blank, a teenage defense mechanism. I thought that was over. So did I, honey. Amy moved to her daughter, a protective gesture. Why don't you go do your homework? I'll be done here soon. Melissa looked at Rebecca and Monroe with an intelligence beyond her years. You think they arrested the wrong person? It wasn't a question. Monroe started to respond, but Melissa cut her off. I've read everything about Dad's case. Court transcripts, news articles, appeals documents. I've memorized the whole story. And you know what never made sense? Why a man with no criminal record, a steady job, community ties, would suddenly decide to rob a store he visited all the time, where everyone knew him. She crossed her arms. But everyone said the evidence was solid, that justice was served, so I accepted it. Melissa, Amy said warningly. No, Mom. If there's doubt, don't we want to know? Melissa's voice was fierce. Don't we want to make sure the person who killed Dad actually pays for it? What if it's not Marcus Holloway? What if the real killer has been free this whole time? Amy sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. I can't do this again. I can't relive it. The investigation, the trial, the appeals, it was torture. And now you're telling me it might have been for nothing? Rebecca moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. Mrs. Chen, I understand this is devastating, but you deserve the truth. Gerald deserves the truth. And if there's even a possibility that we got it wrong, we have an obligation to make it right. Tell me about that night, Monroe said, her voice gentle but persistent. I've read the police reports, but I want to hear it from you. Everything you remember. Amy was quiet for a long moment, struggling visibly with the decision to continue. Finally, she spoke, her voice distant with memory. Gerald was covering for his manager that night. He usually worked days, but Frank called in sick. Gerald took the night shift. I wasn't happy about it. The neighborhood had been having problems, robberies, gang activity, but we needed the money. I was pregnant with Melissa, and we were trying to save for a down payment on a house. She paused, collecting herself. Melissa sat down on her other side, taking her mother's hand. He called me around 10:15, said it was slow, just a couple customers all night. He sounded tired, said he'd be home by midnight. We could watch a movie. Amy's voice broke. That was the last time I spoke to him. The next call was from a police officer telling me to get to the hospital immediately. Did he mention any customers specifically? Monroe asked. Anyone who made him nervous? No, he just said it was slow. Amy frowned, concentrating. Wait, he did say something weird. He said a guy came in asking strange questions about the security cameras, whether they worked, If they recorded all the time. Gerald thought it was odd, but figured the guy was just paranoid about being recorded. Rebecca and Monroe exchanged glances. Did he describe this person? Not really. Just that he seemed nervous, kept looking around. Amy's eyes widened as realization hit. You think that was the shooter? Someone casing the place? Possibly, Monroe said, making notes. This wasn't in any of the reports. Did you tell Detective Russo about this? I don't remember. Everything from those first few days is a blur. They gave me sedatives. I was barely functional. Amy pressed her fingers to her temples. Oh God. What if I did tell him and he didn't include it? What if there was information that could have led to the real killer and it was just ignored? Detective Russo's investigation had multiple problems, Monroe said carefully. We're documenting all of them, but right now I need to ask you about the witness, Raymond Vickers. Did you ever meet him? At the trial, he testified about seeing Marcus Holloway shoot Gerald. He seemed certain. Positive identification. Amy's expression twisted with confusion. Are you saying he lied? We're saying his testimony may have been compromised. He had outstanding warrants that disappeared after he cooperated. He received a substantial reward, and when we tried to contact him for follow-up questions, he immediately lawyered up. Monroe pulled out her folder now, opening it to show photographs. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to show you some pictures. I need you to tell me if you recognize anyone. The first photo was Raymond Vickers' booking photo from 2011. Disheveled, angry, defiant. Amy studied it, shook her head. I only saw him at the trial. He looked different then, cleaned up. Monroe showed her another photo. Detective Frank Russo from 2013, in his dress uniform, receiving a commendation. What about him? That's Detective Russo. He was the lead investigator. He was. Amy paused, thinking. He was very certain, very confident. He told me they had the right man, that justice would be served. I believed him. Did he ever seem rushed? Like he wanted to close the case quickly? Amy's frown deepened. Now that you mention it, yes. The arrest happened fast, less than 24 hours after Gerald died. Russo said they had to move quickly before Holloway could flee, but it seemed, I don't know, almost too efficient, like he already knew exactly who to arrest. Melissa spoke up, her voice sharp with teenage logic. If Holloway was planning to rob the store, why would he go there earlier the same night when people could see him? Why not wear a disguise? Why not use a different store where he wasn't known? She looked at her mother. I've wondered that for years, Mom. It never made sense. Sometimes criminals make stupid mistakes, Amy said, but her voice lacked conviction. Or sometimes innocent people get framed, Melissa countered. Mom, what if we've been wrong this whole time? What if I've spent 12 years hating the wrong person? The room fell silent, heavy with the weight of that possibility. Rebecca watched Amy Chen wrestle with cognitive dissonance, the narrative she'd built her life around crumbling against new information that demanded reconsideration. If Holloway didn't kill Gerald, Amy said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, then who did? That's what we're trying to find out, Monroe replied. But we need your help. Anything Gerald might have mentioned in the days before his death, any unusual customers, anyone who seemed interested in the store's security or cash handling procedures, anything. Amy closed her eyes, searching through 12 years of grief-distorted memory. There was someone. A week before Gerald died, maybe less. He came home upset. Said a customer had gotten aggressive when he asked for ID to buy cigarettes. The guy was older, white, wearing a baseball cap. Gerald said he had this look in his eyes, cold, like he was calculating something. Gerald asked him to leave, and the guy did, but not before making some comment about how easy it would be to rob the place. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Did Gerald report this? I don't think so. He said it was probably nothing, just some drunk guy running his mouth. Amy opened her eyes and they were filled with dawning horror. That was him, wasn't it? The person who killed Gerald. He was planning it. And we did nothing. You couldn't have known, Rebecca said firmly. But this is important. Can you describe him in more detail? White male, maybe 40s or 50s. Baseball cap, I think Gerald said it was a brewer's cap. He mentioned the guy was sweating even though the air conditioning was on. That's what made Gerald think he was on drugs or drunk. Amy's hands trembled. That's all I remember. Is it enough? It's more than we had an hour ago, Monroe assured her. And it matches Marcus Holloway's description of another customer in the store the night of the murder. A customer that was never investigated. Melissa pulled out her phone, typing quickly. Brewer's cap, white male, 40s or 50s, asking about security cameras, aggressive behavior a week before the murder. "Mom, that's not a random customer. That's someone planning a robbery. Or someone who committed the robbery and needed a scapegoat," Rebecca added. "Raymond Vickers was 32 in 2013. The description doesn't match him. But it's possible Vickers was an accomplice, or witnessed something and was paid to identify Holloway instead." Amy stood again, pacing with agitated energy. "If this is true, if Marcus Holloway is innocent, then I've spent 12 years wanting the wrong person dead. I testified at his sentencing. I told the judge he deserved the death penalty. I've checked the execution schedule every year, hoping to see his name." Her voice rose. "I've made my daughter hate a man who might have done nothing wrong." "Mom, stop," Melissa said, moving to her mother. "You did what anyone would do. You believed the police. You believed the system worked. That's not your fault." "It is if we kill an innocent man," Amy said, tears finally breaking through. "Don't you see? If they execute Holloway and we find out later he was innocent, I'm complicit. I helped kill him with my victim impact statement, my testimony, my demand for justice." Rebecca approached carefully. "Mrs. Chen, listen to me. This investigation is ongoing. We don't know yet what the truth is, but I promise you we will find it. And if Marcus Holloway is innocent, we will do everything in our power to free him before it's too late. You have my word." "And if he's guilty?" Amy asked, searching Rebecca's face. "What if you're wrong? What if you tear apart a closed case and traumatize my family for nothing? Then we'll know for certain, and you can have peace in that certainty," Rebecca replied. "But right now there's too much doubt, too many unanswered questions. And doubt, Mrs. Chen, is something none of us can live with." Amy sank back onto the couch, exhausted by emotion. Melissa wrapped her arms around her mother, and for a moment they just sat there, a family broken by violence, held together by love, struggling with the possibility that their understanding of that violence might be completely wrong. "What do you need from us?" Melissa asked, her young voice carrying unexpected strength. Monroe closed her folder. "For now, just what you've given us. If you remember anything else, any detail, no matter how small, call me immediately. And Mrs. Chen, I need you to be prepared. If this goes where I think it's going to become public. Media attention, requests for interviews, people questioning your original statements. It's going to be difficult." "More difficult than losing my husband?" Amy asked bitterly. "More difficult than raising a daughter alone? More difficult than living with rage for 12 years? She shook her head. "If finding the truth means going through hell again, I'll do it. Because Melissa is right. We deserve to know who really killed Gerald. Even if it destroys everything I've believed for over a decade." They left the Chen house as the sun was setting, painting the suburban street in shades of amber and shadow. In the car, Monroe was quiet for a long time, processing everything they'd learned. "The man in the brewer's cap," she said finally. "That's our real killer. Someone who cased the store came back a week later, shot Gerald Chen and let Marcus Holloway take the fall. The question is, how did Raymond Vickers fit into this? Was he an accomplice? A witness who was paid to lie? Or was he the man in the brewer's cap?" "We need to find him," Rebecca said. "Whatever it takes. If he won't talk voluntarily, we need to make him talk. That's going to be difficult without official authority. I'm already pushing the boundaries of what I can do without department approval." Monroe's expression was troubled. "Rebecca, I need to be honest. If we keep pushing this, we're going to face serious resistance. Maybe even retaliation. Are you prepared for that?" Rebecca thought about Marcus Holloway, sitting in a cell for 12 years for a crime he likely didn't commit. She thought about Amy Chen, living with misplaced rage. She thought about Melissa, constructing her identity around hating an innocent man. She thought about the system, her system, failing all of them. "I'm prepared," she said. "Whatever comes, I'm ready." Her phone buzzed. A new message on the replacement phone she'd gotten that morning. Another unknown number. "Last warning. Drop the Chen investigation or face consequences. This is not a game." Rebecca showed it to Monroe, who photographed it with grim satisfaction. "They're getting desperate, that's good." "Is it?" Rebecca asked. "Because they seem pretty confident they can stop us." "They can try," Monroe said, starting the car. "But I've been a cop for 15 years. I've gone up against gang leaders, corrupt officials, and murderers who thought they were untouchable. Someone sending anonymous threats doesn't scare me. It motivates me." As they drove back toward the city, Rebecca's mind was already working on next steps. Tomorrow she'd meet with the State Corrections Board, start the formal appeals process for Holloway. Torres was compiling the visitor and communication logs, Monroe was tracing Russo's finances and trying to locate Vickers. The pieces were coming together. Slowly, painfully, but coming together. And somewhere in Milwaukee, someone was watching. Someone who'd gotten away with murder 12 years ago and was now realizing that their perfectly constructed frame job was unraveling. Rebecca smiled grimly. Let them watch. Let them threaten. Let them come. Justice was no longer pending. It was in motion, and nothing was going to stop it. The call came at 3:47 a.m., jarring Rebecca from restless sleep. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, heart pounding. A dangerous reaction for someone still recovering from cardiac arrest. Detective Monroe's name glowed on the screen. Monroe, what? Raymond Vickers is dead. Monroe's voice was tight. Controlled fury, barely contained. Tampa PD found him 2 hours ago. Single gunshot to the head. Made to look like suicide, but the scene is wrong. Too clean. Too convenient. Rebecca was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with one hand. You're sure it wasn't suicide? I'm sure someone wanted us to think it was. The gun was in his hand, positioned perfectly. No sign of struggle. But Vickers was right-handed. The gun was in his left hand. And the powder residue pattern doesn't match a self-inflicted wound. Monroe paused. Rebecca, this happened less than 6 hours after we tried to contact him. Someone knew we were closing in and decided to eliminate the witness. We need to get to Tampa, now. Rebecca's mind raced through logistics, implications, dangers. Can you get authorization? I'm already at the airport. Milwaukee PD is playing politics. They don't want to officially investigate a sister department's closed case. But I've got vacation time and a friend at Tampa PD who owes me favors. I'm going as a concerned colleague, nothing official. Monroe's voice dropped. Rebecca, this just became a murder investigation. Whoever killed Vickers is the same person who killed Gerald Chen, and they're willing to kill again to keep it buried. I'm coming with you. You're recovering from a heart attack. Your doctor. My doctor can file an objection. I'll be at Mitchell International in 90 minutes. Rebecca hung up before Monroe could argue further. The drive to the airport was dark and empty. Milwaukee sleeping through the hours when bad things happened in other cities. Rebecca's mind wouldn't stop calculating, analyzing, predicting. Vickers' death changed everything. It proved conspiracy, proved cover-up, proved that someone with resources and ruthlessness was protecting secrets worth killing for. It also meant Marcus Holloway's life was in immediate danger. She called Torres from the car. He answered on the second ring, alert despite the hour. Corrections officials never really slept soundly. Rebecca, what's wrong? Everything. She filled him in quickly, efficiently. Robert, I need you to put Holloway under protective custody. Isolated cell, restricted access, no contact with general population. Someone is cleaning house, and he's the only person left who can testify about what really happened that night. You think someone would try to kill him inside Redwood? I think we're dealing with people who've already killed twice and framed an innocent man. Prison walls won't stop them if they're motivated enough. Rebecca merged onto the highway, the airport signs glowing ahead. Please, Robert, keep him safe until we figure this out. Consider it done. I'll personally oversee the transfer. Torres hesitated. Rebecca, be careful. You're making powerful enemies. Good means we're doing something right. She met Monroe at the departure gate, both of them traveling light, just carry-ons containing laptops, files, and grim determination. The flight to Tampa was 3 hours, departing at 6:15 a.m., arriving at 9:15 local time. They'd lose an hour to the time zone change but gain something more valuable, answers. On the plane, Monroe spread out her files on the tray table, keeping her voice low. Tampa PD sent me preliminary scene photos. Look at this. She showed Rebecca images on her tablet. A modest apartment, a body slumped in a chair, gun on the floor. See the blood spatter? It's wrong for a contact wound. The angle is off. And look here. She zoomed in on Vickers' hand. No defensive wounds, no hesitation marks, no signs he was holding the gun when it fired. Staged, Rebecca confirmed. How sloppy was the staging? Sloppy enough that the responding officers called it in as suspicious, but not sloppy enough that it'll be easy to prove murder without more evidence. Monroe swiped through more photos. I've been thinking about the timeline. 12 years ago, Vickers identifies Holloway, gets his warrants dropped, gets a $5,000 reward, disappears to Florida, lives quiet for over a decade. Then we start asking questions, and within 24 hours he's dead. On the flight to Tampa, Rebecca and Monroe realize someone with serious resources is watching their investigation. Monroe reveals newly obtained financial records showing that retired Detective Frank Russo, who officially earned under $80,000 a year, purchased a yacht in cash and received nearly $400,000 in suspicious deposits between 2013 and 2016. The timing aligns with several convictions he led, including Marcus Holloway's. Russo was clearly taking payments for securing convictions, making Holloway one of several victims. They discuss the likelihood that Russo was working for organized crime, possibly someone powerful enough to have Vickers murdered in Tampa before he could talk. Determined to push forward, they land and meet Detective Carlos Rivera, who confirms Vickers' death was staged as a suicide. Vickers had lived quietly for years, so the presence of an expensive criminal defense attorney suggests someone else was financing his protection and his silence. At Vickers' apartment, the crime scene points to an execution. No forced entry, a single shot from behind, and missing electronics. Rivera then uncovers a hidden notebook filled with names, dates, and payments, evidence that Vickers kept detailed records of the conspiracy. Monroe examines the recovered notebook and discovers a decade of secret payments, $170,000 total, made to witness Vickers to lie in multiple criminal cases. The entries reveal a pattern. Vickers was a paid professional witness used in at least 6 prosecutions led by Detective Frank Russo. Rebecca, Monroe, and Rivera realize this is a large-scale conspiracy involving the Milwaukee DA's office, corrupt investigators, and crime boss Tommy Castellano, whose organization appears to have framed innocent defendants, including Marcus Holloway, currently on death row, for crimes actually committed by Castellano's crew. Rebecca insists the FBI must take over. Rivera reveals they are already involved, but the state attorney general suddenly files to expedite Holloway's execution, giving them only 72 hours. Someone powerful wants Holloway dead before the truth comes out. Rebecca races back to Milwaukee, gathering political and legal support during the flight. When she arrives, Torres informs her someone tried to hack into the prison system to unlock Holloway's cell and attempt to kill him inside. Desperate, Rebecca orders Holloway moved to her house for illegal but life-saving protective custody. Marcus, bewildered, asks why she is risking everything. Rebecca tells him the system failed him and she won't let an innocent man die. As he's secured in a reinforced safe room in her home, Rebecca works through the night, preparing legal motions and evidence briefs. With 58 hours left, she vows to expose the conspiracy, save Marcus, and bring down everyone involved no matter the cost.